You sit there with the phone face down on the table, and somehow it still feels loud. Not because it is vibrating, not because anyone is writing, but because a part of you keeps listening to it anyway, as if silence itself might suddenly turn into proof. Proof that you mattered, proof that you were felt, proof that the pain had a purpose. And what makes it so hard is that you are not even asking for much anymore. Not a grand confession, not a dramatic apology, not a perfect love story, just something small and human, a message, a sign, a little movement toward you. But the real ache is deeper than that, because somewhere along the way, love stopped feeling like something you could simply receive. It started feeling like something you had to earn, something you had to prove yourself worthy of, something you had to survive for. You became the one who understood, the one who waited, the one who stayed soft when things got cold, the one who explained, forgave, adjusted, and kept the connection alive with your own nervous system. And if you were honest, there was a strange part of you that believed this was what love looked like. Not ease, not reciprocity, not steadiness, pain, effort, emotional labor. The feeling that if you could just endure a little more, then eventually you would be chosen. This is where the complex begins, not with the other person, with the hidden pattern inside you that learned, long before this relationship, that love arrives through strain, that care comes after proving, that attention must be earned through discomfort, that being wanted means being useful, patient, forgiving, or hurt enough to be unforgettable. Carl Jung would call this the kind of pattern that does not live in logic. It lives in the unconscious. It repeats because it feels familiar, and it feels familiar because it was built early, often before you had language for it. That is why it can feel almost embarrassing to admit how much you still wait. Because from the outside, you know better. You know that if someone wants to speak to you, they can. If someone wants to show up, they can. If someone wants to care, they can make room for it. But inside, another script keeps running. Maybe if I am patient enough, they will soften. Maybe if I do not ask for too much, they will stay. Maybe if I become easier to love, they will stop pulling away. Maybe if I can just endure this feeling a little longer, I will finally be rewarded for all the pain. That is not just hope, that is a complex speaking. And complexes are powerful because they do not feel like thoughts. They feel like truth. They enter the body as urgency, as anxiety, as a tightening in the chest when the silence stretches too long. They make the mind circle the same questions again and again, as if one more interpretation will finally unlock the door. Why did they change? What did I do wrong? Are they thinking of me? Did I matter at all? Why does it hurt this much? But this is only the surface. The deeper truth is more uncomfortable. Sometimes the person you are waiting for is not only a person, they become a screen. A place where an old wound projects itself. A place where your unconscious tries to replay an unfinished story. You are not only attached to them, you are attached to the version of yourself that finally felt chosen in their gaze. That is why the pain can become so intense. Because the loss is never just the loss of a message. It is the collapse of an emotional role. The collapse of the hope that this time, you would not have to earn love through suffering. And if that sounds harsh, sit with it for a moment. Because it is not meant to blame you. It is meant to reveal the mechanism. When Carl Jung spoke about projection, he was pointing to something deeply human. We do not always see the other person as they are. We also see what our inner world needs them to represent. We place old feelings onto new faces. We give them the weight of our unfinished longing. And when you have a complex around earning love through pain, you may unconsciously choose situations that confirm it. Not because you want to suffer, because a part of you believes suffering is the price of belonging. So you may feel drawn to emotionally unavailable people, inconsistent people, people who keep you guessing, people who offer just enough warmth to keep hope alive, and just enough distance to keep you hungry. The pattern is cruel, but it is also intelligent in a dark way. It does not appear to punish you. It appears to keep you loyal to what is familiar, and familiarity can be mistaken for chemistry. That is one of the most painful tricks of the unconscious. You think you are following love, but sometimes you are following recognition. The body recognizes the old terrain, waiting, wondering, overgiving, shrinking, being patient with someone who gives you crumbs and calls it connection. And because the body knows this terrain, it can feel strangely magnetic. You may even tell yourself that you are just deeply caring, that you are more understanding than most people, that you are willing to see the good in them when others would walk away. And maybe that is true. But the shadow side of that goodness is this. If your kindness keeps placing you in the position of the one who must earn basic care, then your goodness has been recruited into self-abandonment. That is where the persona comes in. The persona is the face we build to survive the world, the version of ourselves that keeps us acceptable, lovable, safe. For many people, especially those who learned early that love had to be managed, the persona becomes the good one, the patient one, the forgiving one, the low-maintenance one, the one who does not ask for too much, because asking for too much once felt dangerous. So you learn to smile when you are hurt, to stay calm when you are anxious, to say, "It's fine," when it is not fine at all. You become the person who can tolerate almost anything. And slowly, without noticing, your tolerance becomes your identity. That is how the complex makes you earn love through pain. It convinces you that endurance is maturity, that self-silencing is grace, that longing is devotion, that being easy to disappoint is somehow the same as being loving. But the body knows the difference. The body knows when you are being generous and when you are disappearing. It knows when your chest feels tight before you even read the message. It knows when your stomach drops because you are once again the one reaching, once again the one explaining, once again the one carrying the emotional weight of two people. And if you have lived this long enough, you may have noticed something else. The more pain you tolerate, the less clearly you see yourself. That is not because you are weak. It is because pain narrows consciousness. It makes the world smaller. It keeps attention locked on the next sign, the next reply, the next possibility of relief. You stop asking, "Is this good for me?" and start asking only, "How do I make this work?" That is the moment the complex becomes a cage. Not because the other person locked you in, because your unconscious learned to mistake endurance for love. There is a reason this kind of pattern can feel almost spiritual. The waiting has a sacred quality to it when you are inside it. You start reading meaning into every delay, every pause, every half-hearted gesture. A late reply becomes a test. A cold tone becomes a mystery. A brief moment of warmth becomes a miracle. And because you are starving for certainty, you begin to feed on fragments. A seen message, a memory, a dream, a song that plays at the right time, a sudden urge to check their profile, a feeling in the chest that says, "Maybe this means something." Meaning is not the enemy, but projection can wear the costume of meaning. That is where Jung becomes so important. Because Jung does not ask you to become numb. He asks you to become conscious, to notice when the unconscious is speaking through obsession, to notice when an old wound is using a current relationship as its stage, to notice when your longing is not only about them, but about a part of you that still believes love must be bought with suffering. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. You may still care, you may still miss them, you may still feel the pull of the old story, but a crack opens in the spell. You begin to sense that the pain is not proof of depth. Sometimes it is proof of repetition. That is a hard sentence to hear, especially if you have built your identity around being the one who can love through anything, the one who does not give up, the one who can hold space, the one who can see the wounded part in others and stay gentle with it. But there is a point where compassion turns into a trap if it is not matched by self-respect. And this is where the shadow enters. The shadow is not just the dark side of your personality. It is everything you have disowned because it did not fit the role you learned to play. Resentment, anger, need, pride, the wish to be pursued, the wish to be chosen without earning it, the wish to stop performing emotional labor for people who treat your devotion as a given. Many people who earn love through pain have a shadow full of rage they are terrified to feel, because if they let themselves feel it, they fear they will become selfish, cruel, or impossible to love. So they keep the rage buried, and the rage leaks out as exhaustion, as numbness, as silent resentment, as a body that no longer wants to reach even when the mind insists it should. That is not coldness. That is the nervous system telling the truth before the personality is ready to. You may have noticed that after enough disappointment, something in you changes. You stop writing first. You stop over-explaining. You stop sending the extra message to smooth things over. You stop trying to rescue the connection from its own imbalance. And then guilt appears, not because you did something wrong, because the complex is losing oxygen. The old role begins to panic when you no longer feed it. If you have been the one who earns love through pain, then boundary setting can feel like betrayal at first. It can feel rude, unfeminine, selfish, cold, dangerous. It can feel like you are becoming someone the old story cannot recognize. That is why people often mistake healing for hardness. But healing is not hardness. Healing is the gradual refusal to abandon yourself in order to keep a bond alive. There is a difference, a huge difference. Hardness says, I do not care. Healing says, I care, but not at the cost of my dignity. Hardness says, I will never need anyone again. Healing says, I can need, but I will not beg to be valued. Hardness shuts the heart. Healing opens the eyes. And the eyes, once opened, see the pattern more clearly. You start to notice how often pain was rewarded in your past. Maybe love came with criticism. Maybe attention came after struggle. Maybe tenderness was inconsistent, and you learned to stay alert, to earn crumbs, to become hyper-attuned to other people's moods so you could avoid being left out in the cold. If that is true, then of course your unconscious would build a complex around earning love through pain. It was trying to protect you. It was trying to help you survive a world that did not feel reliably loving. This is important because the goal is not to shame the pattern. The goal is to outgrow it. The unconscious does not need your hatred. It needs your attention, and attention changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, you can begin to ask a different question. Not, how do I get them to choose me? But, why do I still feel that I must suffer to deserve care? That question goes deeper than the relationship. It reaches the architecture of your self-worth. And self-worth is not a slogan. It is not repeating affirmations in the mirror while your body still believes love must be earned through depletion. Self-worth is the moment your nervous system begins to understand that peace is not abandonment, that consistency is not boring, that being treated well does not need to be justified by pain. It is the moment you stop romanticizing emotional confusion. There is a strange glamour that pain can have when it is familiar. People call it intensity. They call it passion. They call it fate. But sometimes what they are really describing is the nervous system's addiction to uncertainty. And uncertainty is powerful because it keeps you engaged. A steady love may not create the same adrenaline as a chaotic one. A secure person may not trigger the same obsession as an inconsistent one. A healthy bond may feel almost quiet at first because your body is so used to reading anxiety as chemistry. This is why the complex can make you earn love through pain. It trains you to distrust what is simple. If someone is clear, you may wonder where the spark is. If someone is kind, you may wait for the catch. If someone is available, you may not know how to receive it. If someone does not make you chase, you may feel strangely uneasy, as if love should come with a test. That unease is not intuition. Sometimes it is withdrawal from the familiar drug of struggle. And once you understand that, the whole story changes. Because then, the question is no longer whether the other person is enough, or whether they are thinking about you, or whether they secretly care more than they show. The question becomes, what in me still believes that love must hurt to be real? If this names something you have never been able to say out loud, write a single sentence for yourself somewhere tonight. Not for anyone else, just for your own honesty. A sentence like, I am tired of earning what should have been given freely. Or, I no longer want to confuse pain with devotion. Or, I am ready to stop calling self-abandonment love. That kind of sentence matters because it interrupts the trance. The trance is powerful. It makes you revisit old messages like they contain a hidden map. It makes you replay conversations, searching for the moment things shifted. It makes you want to decode silence, as if silence were a secret language. But silence is often just silence, and the meaning you give it may reveal more about your wound than about their heart. That is a difficult truth, because it takes away the fantasy that everything depends on one perfect interpretation. But it also gives you your power back. If their distance is activating a complex, then your task is not to prove your worth harder. Your task is to notice the part of you that believes distance equals value. That part may have been built in childhood. It may have been built in a relationship where you had to be good to be noticed. It may have been built around a parent, a caregiver, a first love, or a long series of small emotional lessons that taught you to wait for love instead of resting inside it. Whatever its origin, it is not your identity. It is a pattern. And patterns can be seen. They can be interrupted. They can be softened. Not all at once, not by force, not by pretending you are above them, but by becoming honest enough to notice the moment your body starts bargaining for scraps. That moment matters, Because that is where the old complex tries to recruit you back into pain. It says, just this once, send the message. Just this once, explain yourself again. Just this once, prove that you are still here. Just this once, make it easier for them to come back. And every time you obey, you teach your nervous system that your discomfort is negotiable. But every time you pause, every time you do not rush to fill the silence, every time you let the ache exist without immediately turning it into action, something new begins to form. A space between stimulus and response. A space where your ego is no longer entirely ruled by the complex. That space is where individuation begins. Individuation is one of Jung's most important ideas, and it does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming more whole. It means no longer living entirely from the expectations of the old role. It means allowing the parts of yourself that were split off by survival to come back into the room. The part that is angry, the part that is tired, the part that wants reciprocity, the part that is done proving, the part that wants to be loved without bleeding for it. Those parts are not your enemies. They are not too much. They are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that your psyche is asking for a different life. A life where love does not need to be earned through pain. A life where your presence is not a performance. A life where your tenderness is not a currency. A life where you do not have to disappear in order to be kept. And here's the strange thing. The moment you stop trying to earn love through pain, you may feel a wave of grief. Because the old pattern, however painful, was also familiar. It gave you a role. It gave you a script. It gave you a sense of purpose, even if that purpose was to keep trying. Letting it go can feel like standing in a room after everyone is left, and realizing the noise was covering your loneliness all along. Let that grief be there. Do not rush past it. You are not only losing a person, you are losing a way of organizing your worth. That deserves tenderness. But do not confuse grief with a reason to go back. Grief is not always a sign that something was right. Sometimes it is a sign that something was deeply wired, and what is wired can be rewired. Not by positive thinking alone, by repetition, by boundaries, by choosing differently when the old urge rises, by not sending the extra message, by not offering the apology you do not owe, by not volunteering for emotional labor that was never yours to carry alone. Each time you do that, you are not punishing anyone. You are teaching your psyche a new definition of love. Love does not require self-erasure. Love does not require pain as proof. Love does not require you to chase what is already yours to receive. Love does not ask you to become smaller to keep someone comfortable. And if you are wondering whether this means you should never care deeply again, no, it means you care differently. You care without collapsing. You care without bargaining away your center. You care without treating inconsistency like a puzzle you must solve to deserve peace. That is maturity. Not cynicism, not detachment as a performance. Maturity. There is a quiet strength in the person who can feel longing and still not betray themselves to satisfy it. That strength is not loud. It does not announce itself. It may look like a closed phone on a table, a person sitting in a room with their own breath, a hand resting on the edge of the bed instead of reaching for someone who keeps pulling away. It may look like nothing is happening, but inside, a great deal is happening. A complex is losing its grip. A persona is loosening. A shadow is being acknowledged. A boundary is becoming real. And when that happens, the whole emotional field changes. Not because the other person is forced to change, not because you have mastered some secret tactic, but because you are no longer feeding the pattern in the same way. The energy that used to go into waiting can begin to return to you. And when it returns, you may be surprised by how much of yourself you had misplaced. Your attention, your appetite for life, your ability to rest, your ability to laugh without checking your phone, your ability to feel a whole day without measuring it by whether someone else gave you a crumb of reassurance. That is the beginning of freedom. Not dramatic freedom, quiet freedom. The kind that lets you exhale without performing for anyone. The kind that lets you sit with the unanswered message and realize that your value was never in their response. The kind that makes you less available to pain and more available to truth. And truth in this case is simple. If love costs you your self-respect, it is too expensive. If connection requires you to earn basic care, it is not secure. If you can only feel chosen when you are suffering, then the wound is older than the relationship. That older wound is what deserves your attention now. Not to blame it, to heal it, to sit with it like a child who learned early that love had to be earned by being good, quiet, useful, or easy. To tell that part of you that you do not need to perform pain to remain lovable. To tell it that being seen should not require disappearing first. That is not fantasy. That is psychological work. The kind Carl Jung pointed toward when he described the long path of becoming conscious. The path where you stop mistaking the mask for the self. The path where you stop handing your inner authority to people who can only meet you through your wounds. The path where you begin to recognize that what you call destiny may sometimes be a repetition trying to complete itself. And once you recognize repetition, you can choose differently. Not perfectly, not forever, but differently enough. The next time the silence comes, you may still feel the old pull. You may still want to reach. You may still want to make the connection make sense. But now, maybe, there will be a second voice, a quieter voice, one that says, wait, one that says, breathe, one that says, do not make pain the condition for your belonging, one that says, you do not have to earn what should have met you with ease. That voice is yourself beginning to speak more clearly than the complex. And the self does not beg, it does not chase, it does not confuse suffering with love. It simply asks you to come back to your body, back to your dignity, back to the place inside you that knows the difference between devotion and self-abandonment. So let the phone stay silent for a moment. Let the room be what it is. Let the ache pass through without turning it into a story about your worth. You do not need to solve everything tonight. You do not need to prove anything tonight. You do not need to win love by enduring more pain. You only need to notice the old pattern when it appears and choose not to kneel before it again. That is how the complex weakens. That is how the unconscious becomes conscious. That is how pain stops being the price of love. And if no one has told you this clearly before, let it land now, slowly, without drama. You were never meant to earn love by suffering for it. You were meant to be met. You were meant to be known. You were meant to be loved without having to disappear first. And if someone cannot meet you there, then the deepest act of love you can offer yourself is not to keep chasing the wound. It is to step back, breathe, and return to the part of you that was waiting all along for your own arrival. My kindness no longer requires self-betrayal. Say that quietly, if it feels true. Say it again if you need to. And then let the silence become something else. Not a punishment, not a test. Just a place where you finally hear yourself.